Hi, this is Aaron. In this video, I'm going to be showing what the integration should look like when setting up the partner compliance between Workspace ONE and Azure AD for conditional access, and then also how to test that it's working, and where to check logs to validate that it is working. So we're going to be testing in this console here, CM420. You can see I'm logged in with a basic administrator account. This account is local to UEM. It is not an Active Directory account, and it just has console administrator role, which is not the highest built-in role that's available. That's traditionally has always been AirWatch administrator, but console administrator is enough to set up the integration. Now, one of the prereqs is opting into intelligence. You don't have to have intelligence license. You don't have to have the add-on license. You just need to opt in. As far as I know, I don't even think you need to be able to log into intelligence. In fact, when I click launch here, I cannot log into intelligence with this account. That's because this account, while it does have a admin role on the Workspace ONE UEM side, it does not have an admin role on the intelligence side. And to kind of show you what that looks like, here I'll bring this window down. So here I'm logged into the same environment. I'm at the same OG, but I'm logged in with my AirWatch account. So now when I go to monitor intelligence, when I launch that, I will be able to log in. And then if I click accounts, you can see here's my AirWatch account here, and I have basically I have four different roles, but probably most importantly the administrator role. Here's the basic admin account, and it has 0 roles. So if I needed to do something here, I needed to run a report or do some administrative stuff, someone that's already an admin here would have to grant me that. So they could do that by selecting my account. If it appears, click edit and then assign a role. If my account isn't showing up at all, they can click add account and then provision the account that way. But again, I don't think it's necessary to actually be able to log in order to opt in to the terms of use for intelligence. And this is so that the intelligence can basically make the API calls to Azure for part of the setup, at least. All right, so going back here, we'll go back to the console. Okay, and then we'll look through the setup to see how it is. So largely the setup is done in Enterprise Integration Directory Services. And now you see I have Azure AD for Identity Services enabled. You don't actually need to do that. So this can be set to disabled. That's fine. What is needed is the use compliance data in Azure conditional access policies, and then you need to enable it for the platform you're testing with. So I'll be testing with iOS, so I have it enabled it here. This enables for iOS, Android, and macOS. And then you would click save, and then of course you have to go through those prompts to authenticate with Azure, and then grant permissions to the enterprise app that gets created. And so then that part is done essentially. So just a quick note about this sync button here. This sync button is going to sync any changes I've made to the partner compliance on the Azure side. It's going to sync it to UEM. This sync button here is going to sync device data from UEM to Azure. So changing like the device compliance state. Now when I first set this up, this will be blue. Now if I click resync now, I won't be able to resync again manually for 4 hours. That's okay, because when the device compliance changes in real time, UEM or Workspace ONE rather is making that API call to Azure. So I don't need to manually resync, because when my compliance status changes, that sync occurs to Azure then and there. Now, but say I need to manually resync more than once within a 4-hour period, The way around that is to actually disable. You would disable the conditional access integration, save, that's fine, and then come back, re-enable, enable that, save, go through the authentication and then the authorization again, and that's fine. And that's not going to break anything. You can disable it within UEM and then re-enable it. It will be totally fine. So when you do enable this, it's going to essentially in Azure AD Enterprise Apps, it's going to create this Workspace ONE conditional access one. Now you can see I have this AirWatch by VMware. That's for basically Windows. So you don't need to have this added or set up or configured here in order to test this partner compliance integration. So you just need the Workspace ONE conditional access. So just to show what it looks like, we'll view properties. And so it's enabled for, these are just the default settings. It's enabled for users to sign in. It's not specifically assigned or explicitly assigned to anyone. It's basically assigned to everyone. And then it's visible, but it probably doesn't need to be visible. And then under users and groups, you can see it's one user's assigned. It's my actually my global admin account for Azure for this tenant. This account, of course, just exists here in this Azure tenant. So it doesn't. The enterprise app doesn't actually need to be assigned to users. So and then going down under conditional access, you can see I don't have any policies here. I can certainly create the policy here. I don't have to. I could just go direct from Azure AD to, or yeah, from Azure to Azure AD conditional access. I could then come here, click new policy, create the policy directly here, and that's what I've done. Okay, now before we look at the conditional access policy that I've created, there was another prerequisite step is to set up the partner compliance on the Intune side. So quick way to get there, you go to home and then you click devices. It says you need to go to the Intune portal, and then we'll go to tenant administration, and then connectors and tokens, and then partner compliance management. So this is definitely a requirement. You need to create the partner compliance for each platform, and it needs to have the VMware Workspace ONE mobile compliance as the partner. The platform, it needs to be active, and it needs to be assigned. So that's very important. So under properties, if I click edit, it's assigned to this Active Directory user group called users-grp. The account I'm using to test with to enroll the device into Workspace ONE and then register it on the Intune Azure side, rather the Azure side, is a member of this group. So this definitely needs to be assigned to your account while you're testing. So you need one for whichever platform. So it should have the VMware Workspace ONE as the partner. It should be assigned. Your account should be in the assignment group or user group here. It should be active, and then there should be a last successful sync. Okay, now that that is set up, we can go back to so go back to Azure, and then we'll go to Azure Conditional Access. And then now we can take a look at this policy. So at a minimum, this policy, it needs to be, of course, assigned to the same set of users, and your users have to have the correct license, like an Azure Premium P1 license, and then the like Office 365. If you're wanting to actually test like the sign in to Outlook, for example, from the iPad or Android device. So this is definitely a requirement. It needs to target, at a minimum, Office 365, so that's going to target Outlook, OneDrive, Teams, for example, SharePoint as well. You could also say all cloud apps, but there's that I think has more it's more intrusive. It impacts user experience a little more broadly. so there's more situations you need to kind of account for. So for here, just quick testing, we're going to do Office 365. I don't need any conditions, but you certainly could. Um, so in the grant, at a minimum, you just need require device to be marked as compliant. And it can be set to require all, or it could be set to require one. Because we only have one requirement, this doesn't matter. So this is the minimum setup you need for this conditional access policy to work. You can have it more complex. For example, you could have require approved client app. You could also have require app protection policy. If you enable those, then you would have to actually go back and then enable the condition to be subject to just iOS and Android platforms only. So if I try to actually save this, it's going to oh, actually it worked. Interesting. Oh, that's because I have one of the policy controls. So if I click all here and save, yeah, now it says you have to do Android. Yep. So we'll go ahead and add that. So it would be under device platforms and then iOS, Android. Okay, and then this, of course, the policy has to be set to on. And then now it's saved there. Okay. So now we should have everything we need to test. So assuming you have a device that's already enrolled into Workspace ONE, and you would need to then register it on the Azure side. So to kind of show what that looks like, you would have Authenticator, and you definitely need Authenticator for both iOS and Android in order for this to work. It's not the company Intune app portal. In the case of Android, it's definitely Authenticator when this to set up this partner compliance integration. So if you're testing with Android, be sure to install Microsoft Authenticator. So here's my account that you can see I'm signed in with already. And you can see I have signed into some of the apps, so that's why it has all this extra menu items here. But if I click on the hamburger icon top left, click settings or tap device registration, you can see it's registered with my Azure tenant. That's the name of my Azure tenant. If I tap that, you can see my device ID. I can correlate this in Azure. If I go to Azure AD, and then I go to users and then find the user account I'm testing with, which is this account here, and then click devices. And then here's the device. You can see it has a compliance. It's not compliant right now, and I'll show us why that is. If I click here, I get the device ID, and then here are the two match. And so now you know that this is the right device for the right user. On the Intune side, if we go to look at devices, I actually won't see any devices at all, though we know there's a registration that exists at a minimum. But this, I believe, is just reporting on fully enrolled, MDM enrolled devices. So you're not going to see anything here. You will see the registration, though, of course, here on the Azure side. So, all right. Now, my device is MDM enrolled into Workspace ONE. Here's my device. You can see it actually is non-compliant right now. That's because I created a compliance policy to purposely force it to be non-compliant. And so I can do this for testing purposes, but it should say one compliance violation. If I click on the compliance tab, here's the compliance policy that is assigned to my device, and then here's the status, basically not non-compliant. And then you can, if I wanted to reevaluate, I could click reevaluate, and then it's going to force the evaluation to run again. So I can create the compliance policies by going to devices, compliance policies list view, open that. Let me close this one. Okay, so here's the window, and you would click Add, and then you need to make one specific to each platform. So one for iOS, for example, and then a separate one for Android. Just to take a look, what I've done is I selected the highest version of iOS that's available, or has been seeded to this console, and you can see this device is on 16.11, so it's definitely below that version. So I'm saying all iOS devices that are at 16.4.0 and below, these actions are going to apply. We're going to, most importantly, we're going to mark it as non-compliant right away. Now, you don't have to do that. You can actually do escalations. So you could say, something like this, hey, alert the user, and then after 1 day, we mark as non-compliant. So you could do something like that. But this is the critical part, the mark as not compliant. And then, of course, it has to be assigned, and it needs to be assigned to the device or user using either Smart Group or some assignment group, of course. If it's not assigned to the right device, when you come to the compliance tab here, you won't see the compliance policy. Likewise, when you look at this columns to see like assigned, like for example, your device won't show up here. Okay, so we know my device is non-compliant. Whenever the compliance status changes in UEM, Workspace ONE is going to make an API call to Azure to basically update the device state. And so you can see when that API call is made by going to the device details view and then clicking More, Conditional Access Log. And then you can see here in my testing, I've been testing this now for a little while, and you can see the different events that have happened here. I've been flipping from compliant to non-compliant and so on and so forth. So the most recent one happened, this is in GMT, this log here, because local time is, for me in the East Coast, is 9:32 p.m. And the date is the 26th. So this is GMT. But here UEM or Workspace ONE sent a non-compliant status to Azure to update that device details. If I click the view details here, I can get more information about the API call and the API response body. So I got a status code 0, status accepted. So this is the response body from Azure, and then this is the request body. This is the data, the JSON data that Workspace ONE sent to Azure. So on the Azure side, there should be a correlating event. It does seem hard to find, but let's take a look. So again, this was at the 29-minute mark, and then we could see there was one about an hour before at the 46-minute mark. Now, if we go into Azure, if I go to Azure AD conditional access and I look at audit logs, I should see in audit logs, I should see things like anytime I'm changing like the conditional access policies, or maybe these device update events. I should see something like that here. So you can see these are changes to the conditional access policy, but something like this, device no longer compliant and update device, this is when it's being changed. So this is the most recent one. It's from today at 8:40 p.m. So this is the correct like East Coast local time. So this is about 55 minutes or 56 minutes ago. So about the 40-minute mark. So if we flip back here is the correlating one. So here UEM sent to Azure that, hey, this device is no longer compliant. It's not compliant. That's the status. And so if we click on this here, I can see the this update was successful. I can see basically the activity, and then of course click on modified properties. This is probably the most critical part, is the is compliant property. It had its previous value was true, so it was compliant. Now the new value false, so now it's no longer compliant there. And let's see, we had one at the 29-minute mark about, and the 46-minute. So I don't see the 29 one. I don't see the 46, but we'll keep testing. Now, sign-in logs are going to be when you sign in to an app and it either is successful or not successful. You'll, of course, if you're signing into just the Azure tenant admin console, you'll see that as well. If you're signed into your Azure account through Safari, you'll see that. But so we would want to look for like the app that we're testing with. So in the case like Outlook, for example. So you can see here was an event where I tried to sign in into Outlook and it failed. And you can see the previous event says interrupted. So when you're signing into Outlook and you have this turned on, the user is redirected to Microsoft Authenticator. When that redirection occurs, that's, I believe, where you get this interrupted state coming from. So this isn't like an actual error or anything. This is just like, hey, the user had to switch to a different app. At least that's my take on it. And so if I click on failure, I get more details, and pay attention to this error code 530002. For this error code, the reason for that error code is here. So your device is required to be compliant to access this resource. And then there's some more details about the device needing to be compliant. And then of course I can see the user account it's impacting. There's a correlation ID here I can use to trace everything. I can see the resource in question, and that I guess the incoming request token type or what have you was a primary refresh token, and then here's the user agent string. Now if I go on device info view, I get just a little bit more info, but it says here compliant no. Under conditional access, I can see the conditional access policy that fired. The result of this was failure, meaning I didn't meet the conditional access policy, so I was not granted access or authorization. If I click on it, we can see some more details about how it matched. It matched on this because it was assigned to my account, and it was also just for the Outlook app. And then it failed here under the grant, and it failed because the device not compliant. Okay. So let's refresh here. Now, while you're testing, if you're testing like during the work week, during heavy traffic hours, there might be a 5 to 15 minute delay. If you're testing late after hours or on the weekend, these logs will come in right away. But during the week, you may see a 5 to 15 minute delay between, like, for example, when something like this event comes in, and then by the time it shows up here, the delay it shows up here. So this is actually it now. So you can see it's been about eight minutes at least. So here's the event though. It did take just I think a few minutes for it to come in, but we'll test and see how quickly it comes in or not. Okay, so we know the device is already not compliant. So let's flip it, or actually let's see what the user behavior is like on the device. So I'm signed into like Outlook already, and that was before the device became non-compliant. So the device was compliant. So I was able to sign in. So if I send an email to this account, it'll take a few seconds here to show up, but I'll still receive it. So I have this app has a primary refresh token. I'm not having to sign in. So I'm not subject to the conditional access policies. Now, of course, when that token goes to expire and I need to re-authenticate, I should be prompted to sign in by the app at that time. But because I'm already signed in, I have that that primary refresh token. Here I am. I'm still able to get the email. Now, let's say it's an app I'm not signed in on, or if it's an app I just sign out and then try to sign in. So we'll try OneDrive here. So it doesn't look like I'm signed in. So I will try signing in here into OneDrive. So this is the Azure AD test account. Now it's redirected me to Authenticator. And then, okay, so get access to this resource. This device does not meet your organization's compliance requirements. If I tap more details here, notice the error code 530002. That's the one I called out earlier about basically because the device is not compliant, you're not granted access. And so this is the error code we actually want to see. We know it worked now. And of course, if you're having to troubleshoot with Microsoft, you can always enable the flagging here. That should kind of help. But if I tap open, it's going to go through the sign-in process. Okay, it's asking me to pick the account I want to authenticate with. What's going to happen from the user experience is I'm going to authenticate and everything, but then I just won't be signed in, and that'll keep repeating over and over, and I'll just never be able to sign in. But I'm authenticating successfully. I'm just not being granted access. So here, this message we see, Microsoft account not connected, that this will show up in this condition where it is actually already connected, but the device is non-compliant. Or maybe I'm a brand new user. I'm setting this up for the first time. I just finished enrolling my device. Or rather, I'm trying to sign in to, let's say I just sign into Outlook. I download Outlook, I go to sign in Outlook. And of course it's saying, hey, you need to basically be MDM enrolled. So I would tap connect now. I download Hub and I'd sign into Hub. If I'm already enrolled with Hub, I'm just going to open Hub. I'm going to unlock Microsoft Authenticator here. And then I'm going to authenticate. I'm going to pick the account I want to authenticate with. It says your Microsoft account is connected to Hub. You should be able to access the Microsoft apps in a few minutes. So I'll tap OK. So now I need to go back into OneDrive, see what happened here. And then it doesn't appear that I'm signed in. And if I tap on this, then I go through that same flow again. I get that same, O2 error. And if I tap open, same thing. So it's not clear why, to me as an end user, exactly what's happening here. And I could probably go through this several times before I contact support. So when the device becomes non-compliant, it's actually possible to send a message to the device to Hub. This could be like a push notification, and you can also send an email. And in that email and push notification, you can talk about what you can hopefully alert the user that, hey, you're not going to be able to sign into new apps, new Office apps that you haven't signed into already. So if you tap support, you can see the device's compliance here, and so you can tap compliance, and then if I tap here, I can see details about the compliance policy I'm not satisfying, and then this is like a custom. You can write custom text here to kind of explain everything. And of course, when the compliance triggers for the first time, the device could get a push notification, because the user is not going to know to open Hub or anything. But when they get the push notification, they could, or the email, of course, they can click on that and then see hopefully the alert that, hey, you'll be able to continue to use the Office apps you're signed in to already until your token expires. But any new apps you try to sign into are not going to work. All right, so let's flip the compliance. So if we go to compliance policies, I can modify this compliance policy and I can set it to like a iOS version that's lower than the version I'm testing with. I could also just deactivate it. And so when you see a green circle here, it's active. If I click here, now it's deactivated. It went away because I'm filtering by default. This filters on status active. So if I click all, I now see the policy. So if we go back to the device and refresh, it says zero compliance violations. If I click compliance, I don't have anything here because the policy is not active, so therefore it's not assigned. That's why it shows up blank here. And then I should see that API call. If we go to more conditional access log, I should see a new API call being made. So here it is at the about 45-minute mark, and then device compliant. So I should see this on the Azure side. So if we go back to conditional access and I go to audit logs, okay, looks like I don't see it just yet, but it should come in. Okay, while we wait for that, let's flip back to the device. Okay, so let's try to sign in to OneDrive now that the device is compliant. So let's just kind of force quit, start over, just to see. Now I may not have to sign in all the way if I had somehow obtained a refresh token already, or it's shared through Authenticator, because Authenticator is acting like a broker app. Now all these sign-in events, again, I should see them under the sign-in logs here when this happens. Here it is. Okay, so it took about a minute or so, but jumping back, we know UEM or Workspace ONE made the API call at this time to Azure to say, hey, this device has a status of compliant. So here's the correlating audit log here. It says update device. Here's the device in question. So if I click on it, I get, this was a successful message or action, I guess. But more importantly, click on modify properties, and you can see here it was a non-compliant fault, is compliant false. Now it is, true, so it is compliant. And of course, there's some other details down here. All right, now still not signed in. Let me force quit, reopen. Okay, looks like it's signed in. This is the app protection policy. It's loading in the policy, so it's gonna maybe need to be relaunched. Nope. Okay, it looks like I'm signed in now. Cool, great. So hopefully, if we go to sign in logs, hopefully see something here. Let's see. Okay, so here you can see I tried to sign into OneDrive. So you can actually see here it says OneDrive and then interrupted. So that's when I believe this is when you're switching switching app context, for from the users jumping from like OneDrive to Authenticator, for example. Just the login flow is basically interrupted because you're needing to authenticate through Authenticator. And then eventually when you do log in, you'll get a either success or failure after you successfully authenticate, of course. So here we see, here's that error 0002. Your device is required to be compliant. And then of course I can click on conditional access, click here, and then get more details. Now this is the an event we just did, and recall that I had updated the conditional access policy to say that all three of these conditions need to be met in order to sign in. So that's why we see three different things here. And then of course it matched, on the account, on the app, and then of course the platform. Actually, let's go back. I saw this here. Here's the device ID. And cool. So we've flipped the compliance, so you can actually see here now the device is now showing as compliant. But of course, I don't think the log had come in. Let's do a refresh. See if the log updated. Okay. It doesn't look like it's come in just yet. But that's essentially it. So, alrighty. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer anything. If you'd like access to this lab, happy to send you some temporary admin credentials. And you can access not only the Azure tenant and Intune, but you can also access the Workspace one. So happy to share that. You can enroll your device, of course, too. And yeah, so hope this was helpful for you, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.